Welcome to the film analysis. Today with the second part of the analysis of the Nazi propaganda movie Jud Süß by Veit Harlan. The first part was about the anti-modernism in the film, which is mixed with anti-Semitic propaganda. Now let's focus on the economy and on anti-Semitic character portrayals. The good German worker, that's the blacksmith who gets half his house torn down because it's on the street, for the roads are now administered by Oppenheimer, who collects a toll in the name of the sovereign. Oppenheimer decides to destroy the house on his own as if he has the power over it. That is what is always suggested. Again, the responsibility for everything is shifted onto the Jewish character. This is also the case one scene later. Two underage girls are invited to the Duke's ball, and the father of these girls suspects it right away. The Jew is behind it, he says. So here again, the Germans are the good guys. The assimilated Jew is made the secret ruler of everything, another typical anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. This can also be found in the so-called the protocols of the elders of Zion. This is also a conspiracy theory that was very popular in the 1920s and 30s. The discourse always contrasts virtue, hard work as German attributes with the sexual, promiscuous, wasteful, parasitic, supposedly Jewish attributes. And this scene at the gambling table is symptomatic. Oppenheimer is playing for money with cards, and Faber appears and says that the Jew is playing with the money that others have worked hard to earn. A clear reference is made. The Jews speculate on the stock exchange. Even today there is a talk of casino capitalism of the stock exchange as a big roulette table, although this is highly problematic and wrong, for it is indeed the case that money can be completely lost on the stock exchange. In other words, the value can radically decay, whereas at the gambling table it is always just a matter of the money going into one hand or the other, or the bank collecting it. But money does not disappear, it is not destroyed. Especially since the stock market is about expectations, forecasts and so on. And it's not so much about the pure principle of chance as we have at the roulette table. But this discourse is also opened here, and the Duke observes Oppenheimer as he even flirts with the Duke's wife and says, "Nothing is sacred to you, not even your Duke's wife, only profit." Now, what the Duke is referring to here is not the essence of the Jew, as the film wants us to believe, but the essence of capitalism. Marx and Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto, "All that is status and standing evaporates, all that is sacred is profaned." Capitalism is not an immoral system, but an amoral one. It knows no morality in that sense. It wants to maximize profit, and that is why a moral critique of capitalism is rather delicate. As already mentioned, the world conspiracy is part of the anti-Semitic ideology, and this is strongly emphasized here. It is about foreign domination. You actually say, well, the Duke is a bit frivolous, but the film wants to suggest to us again and again, Oppenheimer is behind all this. There is also an ambivalence here because the Duke strives to become absolute sovereign by disempowering the estates. In a way, what happens here is what happened in Hitler's Germany in 1934 with the Röhm-Putsch, when Hitler became the absolute sovereign. Oppenheimer asks the Jewish community for money to support the Duke's soldiers with whom he is to fight against the land estates. And the estates, they immediately say that the Jews set the whole thing up. Once more, they are suggesting Oppenheimer to be the real powerful one, but he is powerless. If he loses the Duke's favor, he is immediately deprived of power, as is also shown. When the Duke dies, he no longer has any power. Then he must submit to his death sentence. The Swabians, however, continue to present themselves in this film as the good savers. The film once again ignores how capitalism works. Yes, capitalism does not work without loans. Capitalism depends on that. Capitalism also always means speculation on the future. If I open a business today, let's say I invest 10,000 euros, I speculate the investment to pay off in the future with my 10,000 euros perhaps turning into 15,000 euros. Otherwise, I would keep the money with me and not move at all. In Jud Süß, however, all this has Jewish connotations. The universal culprit for all problems is always the Jew. This is then often presented in the collective singular. Almost every scene boils down to this, and other anti-Semitic stereotypes are only mentioned here in passing. The actor Werner Krauss plays 4 different Jews, once a rabbi, a secretary, a shepherd, then an old man at the window making out with a young half-dressed woman. There you have the cliché of the beautiful Jewish woman again. These 4 characters he plays are all greedy, dirty, sick, alchemical. This cast means actually they are all the same. That's why Werner Krauss plays these characters. Secondly, very important, the land estates also refer again to Martin Luther and his anti-Semitic writings. Thirdly, Oppenheimer cultivates French manners. He embodies French civilization against German culture, and at the same time the film portrays him in an effeminate way. That's interesting too. Once you look at more recent films, the effeminate man being always a bit sexually perverted, in inverted commas. Just think of the son of the English king in Braveheart, who is staged as effeminate and homosexual. Let's also think of Xerxes and his people in 300, draped in jewelry. They lived sexually dissolute and non-heteronormative lives. These discourses persist. Fourthly, the film portrays Jews as wordmongers and shysters. One is made to understand that they have no relationship to truth. And then fifthly, the mask-like is particularly important. In one scene between the Duke and Oppenheimer, an interesting dialogue sets in. The Duke has already drunk quite a bit and asks Oppenheimer to take off his mask now. What is behind all this? What is behind all the glamour? And Oppenheimer asks, yes, what's behind it? Yes, take off the mask, the last one. And Oppenheimer asks, what mask? An anti-Semitic cliché flashes up here, that Jews are always pretending, that we never see them for real, that they may not be real at all. But of course, we can also interpret these scenes differently. Civilization means wearing masks and recognizing that there is not the one real thing. And here we are, even if it is about the mask-like, about the real, with acting. Once again with Ferdinand Marian, who plays this Oppenheimer ravishingly, and supposedly that's how it was. Maybe it's a feint to defend himself later. Allegedly, many German female viewers wrote Marian baskets of letters in 1940 telling him, "I felt so sorry for the fate of the poor Jew." It is indeed possible because he acts fascinatingly and because he has a weak antipode, namely the aforementioned Faber. It is not only because of the script that the antipode Faber is a dim character, it is also because Malte Jäger acts so woodenly. And so here too we witness the film producing a certain ambivalence that the very character that seems all too evil to us becomes the most interesting, the one we like best. But then, though an enormously strong emotionalization, the Jewish figure is made evil, namely through rape. Oppenheimer rapes Dorothea, who then goes on to drown herself. And that will be decisive for the justification of the death sentence. Not what else he is supposed to have done, but an old Reich law is quoted, but where a Jew mingles carnally with a Christian woman, he deserves to be hanged. End of quote. And this is updated once again by saying, may our descendants adhere to this law eternally, referring to the Nuremberg race laws. Those who have an anti-Semitic worldview will be able to deepen it through such a film. But if one does not look at this film in such an ideologically blinded way, certain ambiguities open up. And we can ask ourselves, what's in it that Oppenheimer also wants to be successful? That he wants to get out of the ghetto? What about the fact that he gives out loans, that a country must take on debt sometimes? One has to understand what capitalism is to avoid any anti-Semitic view of the film. Oppenheimer is a modernizer. The land estates want to restore a feudal order of the estates, the hierarchy. And with Oppenheimer we see a character in whom feudalism is slowly dissolving, a bit of early industrialization is taking place and modern money is beginning to arise. We also experience, mirrored in the 30s, the film trying to make propaganda for a leader principle and for a hierarchical order. Then no longer through the land estates but through the party, the NSDAP. The capitalism desired here is one without contradictions. No inflation, no crisis, no speculation, no credits. In short, a capitalism that cannot exist, but which the Nazis repeatedly tried to promise to win people over. Max Horkheimer, one of the great thinkers of the Frankfurt School, analyzed this in his essay, The Jews and Europe. 25 sensational pages that you should have read at least once. Horkheimer shows very beautifully how the ideology of the Nazis works. This ideology of good capitalism, if you only remove this evil element, which for the Nazis means the Jews, from capitalism, it functions perfectly. Exactly the ideology that gave rise to the film Jud Süß. This scapegoat obscures the fact that the core of capitalism is different, that it is about maximizing profits and keeping the means of production in one's hands. Horkheimer writes, fascist ideology disguises the same relationship as the old harmonist, meaning liberalism. The rule of a minority on the basis of the de facto possession of the material tools of production, the pursuit of profit ends today in what it has always been, the pursuit of social power. End of quote. That is what is at stake here. And Jud Süß certainly does not want to concede a certain social power to the Jews. Like the film, like Hitler, the intention here is not to say goodbye to capitalism, quite the opposite, but what happens here is that Horkheimer describes it as if he had seen the film. The essay was published a year earlier. He continues, after the 100 year interlude of liberalism, the upper classes in the fascist countries have come back to their basic insights. The existence of individuals in the 20th century is again controlled down to the last detail. End of quote. That is, you had a phase of liberalism with a certain freedom even for the Jews. And now one turns that back again, abolishes this liberalism and creates a capitalism without such liberalism. And this end of liberalism is particularly dangerous for Jews who were able to gain a certain social recognition in this liberalism for a certain time. Nevertheless, Horkheimer says, longing for the times of liberalism before 1933 is not appropriate because fascism had already been programmed into the system. Horkheimer writes the following about this, which makes one prick up one's ears. Inherent in the reality in which the Jews grew up was a natural morality according to which they are now too easily found. The morality of economic power, the same rationality according to whom inferior competitors have always sunk into the proletariat, cheated out of their lives. This economic expediency has now also pronounced judgment on the Jews. Once again, an abundant elite is discussing this time not only France, but the whole of Europe, the cause of the evils and the nature of the remedy. The result is bad for the Jews. They are being pushed under the wheels. Other than that, they are the most efficient today. The leaders of the new order in economy and state, the same economic necessity that irrationally created the army of the unemployed, has now turned against whole minorities in the form of well-considered decrees. The sphere that was doubly decisive for the fate of the Jews as the place of their acquisition and as the foundation of bourgeois democracy. The sphere of circulation is losing its economic significance. End of quote. This is what Jud Süß is aiming at, the estates gaining power. One can say that the German capitalist big industry has the power firmly in its hands again by the end of the film, and nobody asks from the outside. The land estates embody it in Jud Süß. It is a rejection of liberal capitalism and within certain freedoms for minorities, freedoms for the Jews. Under Hitler's war economy, capitalism remains. We talked about the German corporations. To exploitation is now added the extermination of human beings. And so Horkheimer concludes, he who does not wish to speak of capitalism should remain forever silent about fascism. And what does Jud Süß do? Jud Süß talks about the Jews to remain silent about capitalism. That's why the film is very instructive from today's perspective, because we know what happens. We know what happens when you watch but don't see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.